is joining us on this chat I'm going to have with David from Destination Asia in Indonesia. And we are actually going to talk about how, Indonesia, but most of all, of course, Bali. And in November, David, first of all, welcome, David.
Thank you for having me, Christine.
Yeah, but like we said, we talked earlier in 2021, and we talked about, yes, finally, Bali is going to open up, and we were so positive in November, and then whoops, there was an Omicron who flew by, basically.
Exactly. So by the end of November, everything looked really, really positive here. The cases in Indonesia were very, very low. The quarantine was reduced to only 3 days, 2 nights. So we were very optimistic that after the festive season, basically now, like beginning of January, that we will probably completely reduce the quarantine, or maybe have only at least 1 night quarantine, and Bali will open up. Bali airport got already since the 14th of October the official permission to service international flights again. So everything looked really, really good until then Omicron hit the world. And obviously this changed everything. So we went then back to a quarantine of 10 days, then it was increased to even 14 days. By now we are down again to quarantine of 7 days, 6 nights. Upon arrival, but we do still have only flights into Jakarta. So Bali, despite having the permission of already being allowed again to serve international passengers, there's no airline flying until now into Bali, which is most likely because of the quarantine regulations, because Bali is still a holiday destination. And if you need to quarantine 7 days, then most people will just not do it. So the airlines will fly empty and obviously lose money. That's why they are not confirming it.
Definitely. So basically, if we're looking at the situation as it stands today, so if you really wanted to, travel to Bali or to Indonesia, you will have to fly, of course, then directly into Jakarta and then quarantine for 7 days.
Exactly. So we have at the moment the official airports that are allowed to serve international flights and have quarantine facilities is Jakarta, Manado in North Sulawesi, Surabaya in East Java, and also officially Bali. But again, Bali has no international flights at all. Surabaya, I think, has one with Singapore Airlines and one with Cathay coming from Hong Kong. And Manado in North Sulawesi, I think, has also only one from China and one from Singapore. So the majority of the flights would go into Jakarta. And then you would need, upon arrival, 7 days, 6 nights quarantine in a hotel which you can choose. There are around, I think, 70 hotels participating, from 2-star to 5-star. You have to pre-book, you have to pay by yourself. You will then, upon arrival, you will be picked up at the airport by the hotel itself. You will need to do a PCR test upon arrival again. Then you're going to be brought through to the quarantine hotel, where you have to stay the 7 days inside your room. So you're not allowed to leave your room. You will get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which is included in the package price, delivered to your door. And then on day 6, you will do another PCR test. And if this one is negative, then you're allowed to leave on day 7 in the morning and continue your journey, for example, by flying domestically to Bali or anywhere else. Basically, once you completed the quarantine, you can travel all over Indonesia.
Okay, so you have your 7 days quarantine, and like you said, most likely for Scandinavians, we need to fly into Jakarta. And all these packages, can travel agents book them through Destination Asia?
Yes, of course. So we have access to all these packages, and we can book these for travel agencies, tour operator. There will not be much of a commission because the packages are very competitive, but we can, of course, help with the booking, and then the payment would also run through Destination Asia. So you do not need to do a transaction to a hotel which you've never heard of, or you don't even know if it's trustworthy. So we can, of course, handle this and assist us.
Exactly. And for the PCR test, you need to pay for that, or is that kind of included in the package?
It's included in the package. So the package basically includes the 7 days, 6 nights overnight in a hotel with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You have 2 PCR tests, one upon arrival at the airport, one on day 6. You have the airport transfer one way from arrival to the hotel. And you do have every day, I think 5 pieces of laundry, which are also included in the hotel.
Okay. And then, like you said, you can choose from 2-star to 5-star hotels. So you can basically choose your level of, comfortability you want on that. If you decide to do your 7 days quarantine to, if you want to travel down to Bali and stay in Bali then for another maybe 7 or 2 weeks as well in there. Correct. But then you're free to actually travel around. So you could actually do by land, going down by land, down to Bali as well if you wanted to do that. So you basically are free to do what you want.
Correct. Yeah. So you could do an overland tour from Jakarta overland to Bali. Well, the west of Java is not so interesting, but you could maybe fly to Jogja in central Java and then go overland to Bali. So this would, once you complete the quarantine, you're free to go and to do what you want, as long as your test is negative on day 6.
Exactly, of course. That's the whole thing. It's as long as your test is negative that way. Do you need to download any apps or like health apps or anything you need to show that you're vaccinated or have a negative PCR test or antigen test?
Yes, you need. So in general, there have been just this morning, there have been a few amendments, which is for you a bit positive, at least, because until yesterday, actually, everybody who spent the last 14 days in Norway or in Denmark and also in the UK or in France, plus some African countries, those people were until yesterday actually completely blacklisted. So if you spent the last 14 days in one of these countries, you were not allowed at all to enter Indonesia. And this has been revised just this morning. So this blacklist is for now not existing anymore. What you will need to do, you need to be fully vaccinated. You need to have a first PCR test, which you have to do in the country you're departing from, which has to be not older than 72 hours prior your flight. And yes, we do have an app, which is called Peduli Lindungi, which you have to download but you do not need to upload your vaccine certificates or your PCR test into this app, because that doesn't really work. You just need to show them that you've downloaded it. And in the app is like kind of arrival health formula, which you have to complete, and that's all you have to do.
Okay. So fairly easy, and there is just a little bit of your quarantine, of course, to do. And how is things actually? Yeah, because you're based in Bali, David. Yes. So how is things, when you're going out, when your daily life?
Actually, surprisingly normal. And even though, like, we're talking about Omicron, which I think was first in the world, discovered by the end of November. We have it officially arrived in Indonesia. If I'm not mistaken, it was by the 2nd week of December that we had the first 2 cases. By now, I believe we have something around 200 or 300 officially confirmed cases. But if you look at the general numbers, so Indonesia is a very, very huge country with a huge population. So we do have 270 million people living in the country. And we do, at the moment, the official numbers of new cases, what we have per day. Yesterday it was just 600, the day before it was 800, and the days before it was always around like 500 or even lower. So if you consider these large 270 million people living here, and then look at the cases that we have, it's actually nothing compared to what happened in Europe or in America at the moment. So
absolutely. If you're looking back just at Scandinavia, for this in Denmark, we're looking around 20 to 25 or 26,000. So we're way off for you, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm German, so I'm following a bit the German news, and they have in the last 2 days also new record. Yesterday it was 80,000, and today it was 81,000. So, and again, Indonesia has 3 times higher population than Germany, but it's just like a fraction of the cases. So this is also, to get back to your question, that means the life here in Bali is actually pretty normal. So you have restaurants are open, even nightclubs, beach clubs are open, shopping malls, everything is open, cinemas are open. Yes, you do have from the government some restrictions in regards to capacity, so that you, for example, you can fill a restaurant or a cinema or a club or whatever it is only with 50% of its full capacity. You need to wear masks, of course, in public. But aside from this, life here is actually very, very normal. And you do not really feel at the moment that we're actually still in a pandemic.
So basically what you're saying, if you go through your 7 days of quarantine, you're coming to a fairly normal society with not much of a lockdown or, closed. So it's open. You can go out to restaurants, to your nightclubs. You can have a drink. You can literally, have a normal life when you're coming there if you're just on your 7 days quarantine.
Exactly. So once you manage to survive the 7 days in quarantine, then you basically have the advantage of being in a country which is obviously at the moment, since international tourism is rather restricted. So you have really, really good deals with hotels at the moment if you really want to travel, because of course the hotels are struggling with their occupancy. So they're running on 10, 15, maybe 20% occupancy. So there are a lot of good promotions. And you do have all the facilities which with a few exceptions, maybe with some restaurants or hotels which have closed during this pandemic. But in general, everything is open, but without the huge crowds and the mass tourism what you used to have in Bali. So it's actually a very good time to explore and to visit, without being surrounded by hundreds of thousands of other tourists.
And that's actually what we talked about before. We have to look at the upside sometimes of the pandemic, is that there is less crowd, there is less, people in places. So maybe also take the opportunity. It is a little bit of hassle, of course, having your 7 days in quarantine, but after that, you actually have, a little bit of taste of actually what tourism or what Bali was before, it got so popular as it was as a destination. So you can actually feel a little bit of, your Bali, 10, 15 or 20 years ago, because then there was less people.
Exactly.
I actually was in Bali in 1994 or something, like 95, on Jimbaran Beach. And stayed there for 2 months. And Jimbaran is not what it was at that time, where we just walked across the road and there was no hotels and nothing. So that is, even if the hotel's there, you have a little bit of feeling of, that authentic Bali maybe a little bit as well. So I think it's an opportunity to grasp in one way. But if we then, David, look a little bit in the crystal ball, like to do that. What's your feeling? And we have to work on feeling. Like we never say, like a famous man said, hope is not a strategy. But these days we actually have to use hope in one way. But what's your feeling when you're hearing all the announcements and stuff? Where do you think it can be, maybe coming down to a couple of days quarantine, or, maybe 1 day or 2 days quarantine before you can go and explore?
So it's really, need to stress this out, it's really just feelings, because nobody knows at the moment, and there's no official information yet. My personal feeling, looking in the overall situation here, and also like looking back in the past almost 2 years, how the government has acted and handled this pandemic, I would assume that this Q1 not much will happen anymore. It means January, February, March this year. I don't think there's much hope to put on it, but I would still be slightly optimistic, let's maybe say it that way, that probably starting from maybe not straight beginning, but like mid or end of April, that we will maybe or hopefully see the quarantine reduced again, and by then, as soon as really the quarantine is maybe only 1 day, similar what Thailand used to have by the end of last year, I think that would then also be a sign for the airlines to say, okay, now we are resuming our flights, and that would then push the international tourism back to Bali. Of course, on rather slow numbers, we will still be far away from numbers what we had pre-pandemic, but it would be at least a start.
Yeah. So we're actually looking towards, which is Bali's high season, which is summer, because that's the kind of high season. So you probably will be looking at being ready for high season and we welcome a tourist for summertime. If things work as it is. Yeah, exactly. Crossing fingers that there is no new variant coming or another outbreak starting up. But if we continue this path, and it looks kind of positive with the Omicron looking more like a flu than being severe. So if that works and that continues, hopefully we can actually be on Bali shores by summer and be able to see the island back again.
That's what we hope. Exactly. Yeah. Because we missed already the last 2 years high season. So our high season is basically starting by mid-end June until September. So obviously 2021 that didn't happen. 2020 also didn't happen. So we are still hoping optimistically that the 2 years not having a high season, or actually no season at all, that
exactly
by 2022.
So so definitely. I'm just going to check on, because we have a few actually live today. So I just want to check if anyone has any questions, or if I think you've been very clear on all the rules and regulations as it stands at the moment. And the moment we hear any news or any changes, of course, you and me will be back again, and we can go through the changes and what is then required. So we can be, and we will upload also this video on the YouTube channel so people can look and watch back again, and I'll send it out to all the travel agents as well, so they get it on an email too. So that's not a problem.
Great.
Is there anyone who has any questions? I'll have a look. Let me know in the chat. Doesn't look like no one has any questions. I think you've been very clear on what it is. It's basically an open society, but with a 7 days quarantine to come in and visit and have a look at.
Exactly. Correct.
So that's what we're looking at. I think we then coming to a little bit over 50 minutes, but I think it was interesting to hear how actually Bali is at the moment, Indonesia, of course, and sort of all the technical issues in the beginning. But I think we will say goodbye since there is no questions. And I'm looking forward, David, to talk again when we have some more news.
Likewise, so do I. Thanks for having me. Stay well,
Thank you.
everyone.